The annual Galactic Innovation Expo buzzed with the kind of pretentious energy that only came from gathering the galaxy's most advanced civilizations in one place. Space Station Nexus Prime gleamed like a chrome cathedral, its vast exhibition halls filled with impossible technologies that bent reality, folded space, and apparently made coffee taste like disappointment. Marcus Webb stood in Exhibition Hall 7, sipping from his dented thermos and watching a Zephyrian demonstrate their latest quantum consciousness transfer device. The alien crowd gasped as volunteers' minds were temporarily swapped between bodies. Marcus just shook his head and took another sip of his coffee, real coffee, not that synthetic garbage the station served. Next presentation, species designation human, Sol system, announced the automated system in 17 different languages simultaneously. Marcus stepped forward, his prototype mech suit clanking behind him on repulsors. Compared to the sleek, crystalline technologies surrounding him, his creation looked like someone had strapped rockets to a construction excavator and called it a day. Which, to be fair, wasn't entirely inaccurate. Commander Ziltok slithered up to the judging platform, his four eyes independently focusing on different aspects of Marcus's presentation. His scales shifted from green to a dismissive yellow. Ah yes, the human entry. We've heard interesting things about your species' technological capabilities. Professor Keeblix skittered closer, mandibles clicking in what Marcus had learned was the insectoid equivalent of suppressed laughter. Is this functional technology, or perhaps an art installation representing primitive industrial concepts? Ambassador Thrawn materialized beside the other judges, his crystalline form refracting the hall's light into prismatic patterns. Please forgive my colleague's directness, Human Marcus. We are simply curious about your approach to engineering. Marcus gestured to his mech. Well, it's pretty straightforward. Reinforced titanium steel composite frame, hydraulic actuators with mechanical backup systems, modular tool attachments, and enough redundancy to survive a supernova's bad mood. Nothing fancy, just reliable. The judges exchanged glances that somehow managed to be condescending across three completely different evolutionary trees. No quantum processing. Ziltok's tail twitched with amusement. No reality manipulation matrices. Keeblix's compound eyes glittered. No consciousness integrated control systems. Thrawn's voice rang like struck crystal. Nope, Marcus said cheerfully. Just good old-fashioned mechanical engineering. Works every time. But the silence that followed was the kind usually reserved for tragic accidents and really bad poetry. In the distance, Marcus could hear someone demonstrating a device that apparently turned thoughts into edible matter. The alien audience was eating their own ideas. Literally. Me. Ziltok cleared his throat, a sound like gravel in a cement mixer. While we appreciate your species' enthusiasm for participating in this expo, perhaps you might consider that innovation requires, well, actual innovation? Marcus took another sip of coffee and grinned. Maybe. Or maybe everyone else is overthinking things. Professor Keeblix's mandibles clicked so fast they sounded like castanets. Overthinking? Young human, the galactic collective has evolved beyond such primitive concepts as mechanical solutions. We have transcended the limitations of physical engineering. Right, Marcus nodded. How's that working out for you in, say, high-radiation environments? Or when your quantum processors get hit by electromagnetic interference? Or when your consciousness-integrated systems meet someone whose thoughts taste like garlic? The judge's expressions shifted to what Marcus was beginning to recognize as the universal alien equivalent of this primitive is getting uppity. Ambassador Thrawn's form pulsed with slightly less friendly colors. Human Marcus, while your rustic approach has certain quaint qualities, perhaps you fail to understand the sophisticated requirements of advanced galactic civilization. Marcus finished his coffee and screwed the cap back on his thermos. Maybe. But you know what I understand? When something needs to get done, you use tools that work. Not tools that look impressive at parties. The judges huddled together, speaking in frequencies that made Marcus's teeth itch. Finally, Ziltok slithered back to the microphone. The judging panel awards the human entry a score of 2.3 out of 50 possible points. We commend the earnest attempt at technological development and encourage the human species to continue observing more advanced civilizations in hopes of eventual progress. Marcus nodded, completely unbothered. Fair enough. Mind if I stick around to watch the rest of the presentations? I'm particularly interested in seeing how that consciousness transfer thing handles a system crash. As if summoned by his words, an alarm began blaring from the Zephyrian exhibit. Someone was stuck halfway through a consciousness transfer, their mind apparently trapped between two bodies while both hosts stood around drooling. Marcus raised his thermos in a small salute to the judges. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways. He walked away, leaving the judges staring after him while emergency technicians rushed to fix the latest miracle of advanced galactic engineering. The news spread across the galaxy faster than a subspace relay malfunction, and with roughly the same level of dignity. Primitive human embarrasses self at Expo blazed across the headlines of the Galactic News Network, complete with holographic footage of Marcus's presentation looped endlessly beside images of real technology. The commentary was about as subtle as a supernova. I mean, honestly, laughed Blorgan the Hilarious during his nightly comedy show broadcast to 14 billion subscribers across the spiral arm. What's next? Are they going to show up with pointy sticks and claim they've invented advanced hunting technology? His three-headed audience howled with laughter. Let's all give a warm round of applause for the humans and their amazing, what did they call it? The tin can. The nickname stuck like space tar. Marcus watched the coverage from his quarters aboard Nexus Prime, his thermos refilled and his sense of humor intact. On his personal communicator, messages poured in from across human space. Some supportive, some less so. Marcus, what the hell were you thinking? Came the voice of Director Chen from the Earth Colonial Engineering Corps. The board is furious. They're saying you've set back human-alien relations by decades. Maybe, Marcus replied, taking a sip of coffee. Or maybe I've shown them exactly what we're capable of. A 2.3 out of 50 isn't exactly showcasing capability. Chen, when was the last time you fixed something by hitting it with a wrench? That's not the point. That's exactly the point. Sometimes the simplest solution is the right solution. The social networks were even less kind. Tink and Marcus trended for 3 straight days across 17 different platforms. Memes featuring his mech suit appeared alongside images of primitive tools, usually with captions like "Peak Human Innovation" or "Earth's Finest." The Altarian Science Collective published a paper titled "Technological Stagnation in Isolated Species, a Case Study in Human Engineering." It was downloaded 47 million times in the first hour. The Vegan Philosophy Network hosted a discussion on whether primitives should be allowed at advanced gatherings that somehow lasted 6 hours and concluded that humans were charmingly antiquated but ultimately irrelevant to galactic progress. Even the usually diplomatic Centauri Council issued a statement expressing gentle concern about humanity's technological readiness for galactic citizenship. Marcus read them all, sitting in his quarters while his supposedly primitive mech suit underwent routine maintenance in the station's cargo bay. The maintenance was actually Marcus upgrading the suit's targeting systems and installing a few new surprises he'd been working on, but the aliens didn't need to know that. "Hey Marcus," came a message from his younger sister back on Mars Colony. Saw the news. "Mom says you're embarrassing the family name. Dad says you're carrying on the proud tradition of web engineering stubbornness. I say you should challenge one of those fancy aliens to an arm wrestling contest." Marcus grinned and dictated a reply. "Tell Dad his fusion wrench design is still the best tool in my kit. Tell Mom the family name has survived worse. And tell yourself I might just take that arm wrestling suggestion seriously." The worst part wasn't the mockery from aliens who'd never gotten their hands dirty fixing a broken reactor in 0G. The worst part was the messages from his own people, humans who thought he should have known better, should have brought something impressive instead of something reliable. "You had one chance to show them what we could do," wrote Commander Torres from Luna Base. "And you brought a construction mech?" "Dr. Webb," came a formal communication from the Human Colonial Assembly. "While we appreciate your individual approach to representation, future Expo participants will be selected through a more rigorous review process." Marcus deleted that one without reading it twice. The only message that really stung came from his old engineering professor. "Marcus, I taught you better than this." Where was the innovation? Where was the vision? This is exactly the kind of thinking that keeps humanity stuck in the technological dark ages. Marcus stared at that one for a long time, then finally replied, "Professor Williams, you also taught me that the best tool is the one that works when everything else fails. Sometimes vision means seeing what others miss." On the fourth day of the Mockery Tour, while Marcus was calibrating his suit's servo response times, an emergency alert echoed through Nexus Prime's corridors. There was a situation developing in the Kepler sector, some kind of asteroid field threatening a civilian colony. The Galactic Emergency Response Coordination was putting out a call for volunteer assistance. Marcus looked at his mech suit, then at his half-empty thermos. "Well," he said to himself, "time to find out if the joke's on them or on me." He started filing the volunteer paperwork. After all, when something needed to get done, you used the tools that worked, not the tools that looked impressive at parties. The Kepler colony evacuation request came through official channels at 0800 station time, but marked with the kind of urgent red headers that usually meant someone important was about to have a very bad day. Marcus read it while finishing his morning coffee, which had become something of a ritual since the Expo. "Massive asteroid field destabilized by stellar activity," he read aloud to himself. "Trajectory puts 67,000 colonists in immediate danger. Conventional deflection attempts unsuccessful. Seeking qualified operators for emergency intervention." What the official request didn't mention, but what Marcus learned from monitoring emergency frequencies, was that 3 different alien response teams had already tried and failed spectacularly. The Zephyrian Quantum Displacement Unit had successfully moved several asteroids into a parallel dimension, unfortunately along with half their own ship. The Alterian Reality Manipulation Squadron had attempted to convince the asteroids they didn't exist, which worked right up until the asteroids convinced the squadron's computers they didn't exist either. Most recently, the Vegan Consciousness Integration Corps had tried to establish telepathic contact with the asteroids, operating under the theory that all matter possessed some level of awareness. The asteroids, apparently, were very angry about being in space and expressed this by immediately changing course toward the vegan ships. Marcus filed his volunteer application through proper channels, which meant it got buried under 17 layers of bureaucracy and stamped with forms requesting forms to apply for the forms he needed to volunteer. So he did what any reasonable engineer would do: he bypassed the system entirely. 6 hours later, his transport arrived in the Kepler sector to find a scene that looked like a cosmic demolition derby. Chunks of rock the size of skyscrapers tumbled through space in a slow-motion ballet of destruction, their irregular orbits creating an ever-shifting maze of potential death. In the distance, Kepler colony's emergency beacons painted desperate strobes against the darkness. Unregistered craft, this is Emergency Coordinator Vex Hal of the Galactic Response Fleet, came a transmission on standard frequencies. "You are entering a restricted disaster zone. State your credentials and mission parameters." "This is Marcus Webb aboard the engineering vessel Tin Can," Marcus replied, enjoying the irony of using Blorgun's nickname. "I'm here to solve your asteroid problem." The pause that followed was long enough to brew a fresh pot of coffee. "Did you just say Tin Can? As in the human from the Expo?" "The very same." "Permission to begin operations?" "Negative, Human Webb. This operation requires advanced technological solutions. We appreciate your enthusiasm, but civilian construction equipment is not appropriate for stellar emergency response." Marcus took a sip of coffee and fired up his mech's external cameras. The asteroid field stretched out before him like a three-dimensional minefield, but he'd worked in worse conditions. The key was reading the patterns, understanding the physics, and applying the right amount of force in the right places. Coordinator Vex Hal, with respect, you've been trying advanced technological solutions for 12 hours. How's that working out for you? Through his sensors, Marcus could see the Galactic Response Fleet, hanging back at what they considered a safe distance, but their ships bristling with exotic energy weapons and reality-bending devices. Several were already showing damage from their previous unsuccessful attempts. Human Webb, please maintain safe distance while we implement our next strategy. The Crystalline Confederation is deploying a harmonic resonance array that will. Marcus stopped listening and started working. He fired his mech's maneuvering thrusters and headed straight into the asteroid field. The first asteroid he encountered was about the size of a city block, tumbling end over end in a lazy rotation that would carry it directly into the colony's outer defensive perimeter in roughly 6 hours. The Zephyrians had tried quantum displacement. The Altarians had tried reality manipulation. The vegans had tried talking to it. Marcus grabbed it with his mecha's manipulator arms and pushed. Simple Newtonian physics. Apply force, change trajectory. The asteroid's new course would carry it safely past the colony with room to spare. Human Webb, what are you doing? Coordinator Vex Hal's voice cracked with what might have been panic. My job, Marcus replied, moving on to the next asteroid. This one was bigger and spinning faster, its irregular shape creating a wobble that made prediction difficult. The kind of problem that gave quantum computers existential crises but yielded easily to good old-fashioned observation and timing. Marcus watched the asteroid's rotation for 3 complete cycles, calculated the optimal contact point, and gave it a precisely timed nudge with his mech's hydraulic rams. The asteroid's wobble stabilized into a clean rotation that carried it away from the colony. Impossible, breathed someone over the emergency frequency. He's manually adjusting their trajectories. Without quantum processing. Without reality manipulation matrices. Without consciousness integration. Marcus smiled and took another sip of coffee. Yeah, funny how that works. For the next 4 hours, while the Galactic Response Fleet watched in stunned silence, Marcus worked his way through the asteroid field like a cosmic traffic cop. Push here, nudge there, occasionally crack a particularly stubborn rock into smaller, more manageable pieces. His mech suit, designed for the kind of heavy industrial work that kept human colonies running, handled the asteroids like they were construction materials. Which, Marcus reflected, was exactly what they were. Final asteroid cleared, he reported as the last chunk of rock tumbled safely away from the colony's trajectory. Kepler colony is secure. The silence that followed was broken by Coordinator Vex Hal's voice, carefully controlled and professionally neutral, confirmed Human Webb. All asteroid threats have been neutralized. Kepler colony reports all clear status. Marcus was already heading back toward his transport when the new alarm started blaring. Emergency. Emergency. Massive energy signature detected in asteroid field. Unknown technology activation. Repeat, unknown technology activation. Marcus looked at his sensors and felt his coffee grow cold in his thermos. Deep in the heart of where the asteroid field had been, something was waking up. Something big. Something old. Something that probably shouldn't be awake. Well, he said to himself, this just got interesting. The energy signature that appeared on Marcus's sensors wasn't like anything in the standard threat assessment databases. It wasn't the clean, focused output of modern galactic technology, nor was it the chaotic randomness of natural phenomena. This was something else entirely ancient, vast, and absolutely furious about being disturbed. All ships maintain distance. Coordinator Vex Hal's voice carried a note of panic that professional emergency responders weren't supposed to possess. We're detecting massive power fluctuations from coordinates 347.221.889. Unknown technology, origin uncertain. Marcus didn't maintain distance. Instead, he maneuvered closer, his mech's sensors struggling to process what they were seeing. The asteroid field hadn't been random debris, it had been camouflage. Hidden beneath centuries of accumulated rock and ice was a structure that hurt to look at. Its geometry following mathematical principles that made human eyes water and alien sensors throw error messages. "It's a weapon," announced Professor Keeblix over the emergency frequency, his mandibles clicking so rapidly they sounded like machine gun fire. Pre-galactic technology. Possibly predecessor in origin. The predecessors. Every species in the galaxy had legends about them, the civilization that had supposedly existed before all others, but leaving behind artifacts so advanced that modern science couldn't even identify their purposes, let alone replicate their functions. "Weapon confirmed," came another voice from the Crystalline Confederation's deep scan specialist. "Energy output increasing exponentially. Current trajectory suggests targeting of multiple star systems." On Marcus's screens, tactical displays showed the weapon's predicted firing solution. The beam, when it discharged, would cut through 17 inhabited systems like a cosmic laser pointer, sterilizing worlds that held billions of sentient lives. "All fleet units prepare for coordinated assault," ordered Coordinator Vex Hal. "We'll hit it with everything we have before it can reach full charge." What followed was the most impressive display of advanced galactic firepower Marcus had ever witnessed. Quantum torpedoes that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously. Reality-altering beams that convinced matter it was energy. Consciousness disruption fields that could shut down any thinking system. The predecessor weapon absorbed every attack like a sponge soaking up water. Worse, each hit seemed to accelerate its charging sequence. The energy readings spiked higher with every assault. Negative effect. Reported the Zephyrian commander. "Weapon is converting incoming energy to increase output capacity." "All weapons cease fire." Vex Hal ordered. "Repeat, all weapons cease fire." But the damage was done. The weapon's charge cycle was now running at 340% of its original rate. What had been a 6-hour countdown to galactic catastrophe was now measuring in minutes. Marcus studied the readouts while sipping cold coffee and thinking about the problem like an engineer instead of a warrior. The aliens were treating this like a combat situation, trying to destroy something that was apparently indestructible. But every system had weaknesses. Every machine had failure points. You just had to know where to look. "Coordinator Vex Hal, can your ships provide detailed structural scans of the weapon?" "Human Webb, with respect, this is not the time for scientific curiosity. We're evacuating all non-essential personnel from the area." "I'm not being curious. I'm being practical. How do you shut down a machine?" "You destroy it, which we've established is impossible with our current." "No," Marcus interrupted. "You don't destroy it. You break it. There's a difference." Marcus fired his maneuvering thrusters and headed directly toward the weapon, ignoring the increasingly frantic calls from the response fleet. His mech sensors, designed for close inspection work on industrial machinery, began mapping the weapon's surface structures. There. Every machine needed power regulation, thermal management, structural support. The weapon might be beyond galactic science, but it still followed basic engineering principles. It still had vulnerable points where function was more important than armor. "Human Webb, return to safe distance immediately." Vex Hal's voice cracked with authority and desperation. "Can't do that, Coordinator. I've got a job to finish." The weapon's surface was warming up, exotic energies beginning to flow through conduits that looked like crystallized mathematics. In roughly 3 minutes, it would discharge and 17 star systems would cease to exist. Marcus positioned his mech carefully, targeting sensors locked onto a junction where 3 major conduits met. A weak point. a place where the ancient engineers had prioritized function over protection. "All ships, clear the area," Marcus transmitted. "When this thing breaks, it's going to break hard." "Human Webb, what are you planning?" Vexhal demanded. Marcus cracked his knuckles, flexed his mech's manipulator arms, and grinned. "I'm going to punch it." The predecessor weapon hung in space like a nightmare made of mathematics and malice, its surface crawling with energy patterns that made reality hiccup. Inside what Marcus had mentally dubbed the Death Moon, because calling it a weapon made it sound manageable. Ancient systems were reaching full charge with the kind of inexorable certainty usually reserved for tax deadlines and entropy. "Human Webb, please clarify your previous transmission." Coordinator Vexhal's voice carried the careful tone of someone trying to talk a lunatic off a ledge. "Did you say you were going to punch a predecessor superweapon?" Marcus maneuvered his mech closer to the weapon's surface, his sensors reading stress patterns in the crystalline matrix that served as the structure's skin. Every piece of engineering had weak points, places where form followed function at the expense of durability. The trick was finding them and applying force in exactly the right way. "Not just punch it," Marcus clarified, positioning his mech above a junction where 6 major energy conduits converged. "I'm going to punch it in exactly the right place with exactly the right amount of force to create a cascading system failure." The silence that followed was broken only by the increasingly urgent warnings from the weapon's charging sequence. 2 minutes 37 seconds until 17 star systems became cosmic dust. That's insane," stammered Professor Keeblix. "The structural integrity of predecessor technology is beyond our comprehension. The materials science alone." "Is still just materials science," Marcus interrupted, taking a final sip of coffee and setting his thermos aside. "Look, I've been fixing broken machinery for 20 years. Doesn't matter if it's a fusion reactor or a coffee maker, everything breaks the same way." He engaged his mech's hydraulic systems, feeling the familiar thrum of mechanical power building in the actuators. No quantum processing, no reality manipulation, no consciousness integration. Just good old-fashioned applied physics. "You cannot seriously believe that primitive mechanical force will succeed where our most advanced weapons have failed," Ambassador Thrawn's crystalline voice rang with indignation. "Your advanced weapons fed it energy," Marcus pointed out. Studying the stress analysis his sensors were painting across his HUD, "I'm going to hit it with kinetic force in a place where kinetic force will do the most damage." The energy junction beneath his mech was a nexus of 6 conduits, each one carrying enough power to crack a planet. But the junction itself was designed for energy flow, not structural integrity. The ancient engineers had built their weak point right into the system. "Human Webb," Vexhal tried one last time. "Even if your analysis is correct, the energy release from a catastrophic failure could be spectacular," Marcus agreed. "That's why you're all staying at safe distance." 1 minute, 43 seconds. Marcus positioned his mech's right manipulator arm directly over the junction, hydraulics whining as they built up maximum pressure. The targeting computer painted red circles around stress concentration points, showing him exactly where to hit and how hard. For the record, he transmitted to the fleet, "This is the kind of problem-solving humans are actually good at. When something's broken, we hit it until it works. When something needs to not work, we hit it until it breaks." 57 seconds. The weapon's surface was now glowing with contained stellar fire, energy patterns racing toward the primary discharge array like luminous blood through crystal veins. In less than a minute, all that power would lance out across the galaxy, and billions would die. Marcus pulled his arm back, hydraulics reaching maximum extension. "Sometimes," he said to himself, "the old ways really are the best ways." 38 seconds. He punched the weapon. The impact transferred every ounce of kinetic energy his mech could generate directly into the junction's crystalline matrix. For a microsecond, nothing happened. Then physics took over. The crystal cracked. The crack propagated along the stress lines Marcus had identified, racing through the conduit network like lightning through a wire. Energy that had been flowing smoothly through the weapons system suddenly found itself with nowhere to go except sideways, into structures never designed to handle that kind of power. Secondary explosions began rippling through the weapon's interior as overloaded systems cascaded into failure. The ancient engineering that had seemed indestructible moments before proved to have the same weakness as every other piece of machinery ever built. It could be broken if you hit it in the right place hard enough. The weapon's discharge sequence stuttered, stalled, and reversed as runaway energy began tearing apart the systems meant to contain it. What had been a precisely controlled charge cycle became a chaotic feedback loop that grew more violent with each passing second. Massive structural failure detected, reported the Crystalline Confederation's sensor operator. The weapon is experiencing catastrophic system collapse. Marcus was already accelerating away from the weapon as fast as his mech's thrusters could carry him, but he took a moment to look back at his handiwork. The Death Moon was coming apart from the inside out, its perfect geometry dissolving into expanding clouds of exotic matter and broken mathematics. All ships, emergency retreat. Vex Hell ordered. The weapon is going to. The explosion, when it came, was visible from 3 star systems away. The predecessor weapon didn't just break it unmade itself, taking a significant chunk of local spacetime with it. For approximately 2.7 seconds, the laws of physics in the immediate area became more like polite suggestions, and several of the closer ships reported their computers briefly forgetting how to count to 10. When the chaos subsided and sensors could function again, the weapon was gone. In its place was an expanding sphere of crystalline debris that sparkled like cosmic confetti, completely harmless and very pretty. Marcus floated in the aftermath, checking his mech systems and finding everything still operational. His coffee was cold, but that was about the only casualty on his side. Weapon destroyed, he reported with the satisfaction of a job well done. Kepler colony and 17 star systems are secure, but that'll be overtime rates, by the way. The communications channels were silent for a very long time. Finally, Coordinator Vex Hal's voice returned, carefully controlled and professionally neutral, confirmed, Human Webb. Threat neutralized. The Galactic Council will want to speak with you. Marcus grinned and started heating up a fresh pot of coffee. Something told him he was going to need it. The Galactic Council emergency session convened 3 days after what historians would later call the Moon Punch incident, though Marcus preferred thinking of it as Tuesday. The Grand Chamber on Nexus Prime, usually reserved for debates about trade agreements and philosophical discussions about the nature of consciousness, was packed with representatives from every major civilization in the galaxy. Marcus sat in the witness chair, a piece of furniture apparently designed by someone who believed comfort was a sign of moral weakness, wearing his best engineering coveralls and sipping coffee from his thermos. Around him, the galaxy's most powerful beings whispered in frequencies that made his teeth itch. The chair recognizes Ambassador Thrawn of the Crystalline Confederation, announced the session moderator, and a floating sphere of coherent energy that somehow managed to sound bureaucratic. Thrawn materialized at the speaking podium, his crystalline form refracting the chamber's light into prismatic patterns that probably meant something diplomatic. Honored colleagues, we face an unprecedented situation. A human, a member of a species we have consistently rated as technologically primitive, has accomplished something that our most advanced civilizations could not. Murmurs rippled through the chamber in 17 different languages, most of them variations on "that's impossible" and "I told you so." The facts are undeniable, Thrawn continued. Using what can only be described as crude mechanical force, human Marcus Webb successfully neutralized a predecessor superweapon that had absorbed our most sophisticated attacks without effect. Commander Ziltok slithered to his own microphone, his scales shifting through colors that Marcus was pretty sure translated to diplomatic embarrassment. With respect to my crystalline colleague, we must consider the possibility that this was simply an unprecedented coincidence. Perhaps the weapon was already failing due to age, and the humans' intervention merely coincided with its natural collapse. Marcus took a sip of coffee and raised his hand. Permission to speak? The moderator pulsed with what might have been surprise. The witness has not been formally questioned yet. Yeah, well, I figured I'd save everyone some time. Marcus stood up, his mech suit visible through the chamber's observation ports where it was undergoing technical evaluation by teams of alien scientists. Commander Ziltok, your theory would be a lot more convincing if your own sensor logs didn't show the weapon's power output increasing after I hit it, before the cascade failure began. Ziltok's tail twitched with what Marcus recognized as the universal sign of someone being caught in an uncomfortable truth. Professor Keeblick scuttled forward, mandibles clicking rapidly. Even accepting the human's interpretation of events, we cannot ignore the broader implications. If crude mechanical force is somehow superior to our quantum-enhanced technologies, then our understanding of engineering principles requires fundamental revision. Or Marcus suggested, maybe you all just overthought the problem. The silence that followed was the kind usually reserved for funerals and really awkward family dinners. Ambassador Thrawn's crystalline form pulsed with diplomatic colors. Human Marcus, surely you do not suggest that the galaxy's most advanced civilizations have been overthinking our technological development? Marcus shrugged. Look, I'm not saying quantum processing and reality manipulation aren't impressive. They're amazing party tricks. But when you need to fix something that's broken, sometimes the best tool is a hammer. A hammer, repeated Ziltok, his scales shifting to what Marcus thought might be incredulous yellow. A hammer, Marcus confirmed. Basic tool. You hit things with it. Very reliable. The chamber erupted in multilingual chaos as representatives tried to process the concept that their sophisticated technologies might be inferior to hitting things with blunt objects. In the midst of the chaos, Marcus noticed several younger aliens taking notes on portable devices, their expressions thoughtful rather than dismissive. The moderator pulsed with authoritative energy. Order. The chair recognizes Supreme Coordinator Vel Tar of the Galactic Defense Network. A new figure materialized at the central podium, something that looked like it had been assembled from spare parts of 3 different species and held together with diplomatic immunity. When it spoke, its voice carried the weight of someone who'd seen too many wars and not enough victories. Honored colleagues, Vel Tar began, while we debate engineering philosophy, we cannot ignore a simple fact. The human succeeded where we failed. The question is not whether his methods were sophisticated, but whether they were effective. More murmurs, these ones tinged with what Marcus was beginning to recognize as bureaucratic panic. Furthermore, Vel Tar continued, our preliminary analysis of the human's mech suit reveals engineering principles that, while simple, demonstrate remarkable efficiency and reliability. Perhaps it is time we reconsidered our assumption that technological advancement necessarily requires increasing complexity. Marcus raised his hand again. If I could add something. The moderator pulsed with resignation. The witness may speak. Back on Earth, we have a saying, if it's not broken, don't fix it. Your technologies are impressive, but they're solutions to problems you've created by making things more complicated than they need to be. Marcus gestured toward the observation ports where his mech suit was still being studied. That suit has been running for 5 years without a major overhaul. How long do your quantum processors last before they need consciousness recalibration? The uncomfortable silence that followed was answer enough. Supreme Coordinator Vel Tar's mechanical components whirred softly. The Galactic Defense Network formally recommends that humanity be granted full membership in the Galactic Council, with immediate effect. We also recommend the establishment of a joint technology exchange program to study human engineering principles. Seconded, came a voice from the Centauri delegation. Thirded, added someone from the Vegan Collective. Within minutes, the vote was unanimous, something that had never happened in the Council's 1,000-year history. Marcus finished his coffee and stood to leave, but Ambassador Thrawn's voice stopped him. "Human Marcus, one final question. What do you intend to do now?" Marcus grinned and held up his thermos. "Get some fresh coffee and start working on next year's expo entry. I'm thinking of calling it the Really Big Hammer." As he walked out of the chamber, Marcus could hear the representatives breaking into excited conversations about revolutionary simplicity and elegant mechanical solutions. Through the observation ports, he could see alien scientists still swarming over his mech suit, trying to figure out how something so simple could be so effective. 6 months later, at the next annual Galactic Innovation Expo, Marcus stood in Exhibition Hall 1, the prime spot, usually reserved for the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. His new display featured not just his upgraded mech suit, but a complete line of human-designed tools that solved complex problems through simple means. The judges, the same ones who'd scored him 2.3 out of 50 the previous year, approached his display with expressions that mixed professional respect with personal embarrassment. "Human Marcus," Commander Ziltok said carefully, "we look forward to your presentation." Marcus took a sip of coffee from his thermos, the same dented one he'd carried for years, and smiled. "Gentlemen," he said, "let me tell you about the hammer." The galaxy, as it turned out, was ready to learn. 1 year later. The annual Galactic Innovation Expo had changed. Where once the exhibition halls had been filled with devices that bent reality into impossible shapes and computed the dreams of artificial minds, now there was a new section entirely, Practical Solutions Pavilion, sponsored by the Human Engineering Collective. Marcus walked through the halls, noting the changes with quiet satisfaction. The Zephyrian booth was demonstrating their new quantum mechanical hybrid drive, a propulsion system that used quantum processing for navigation, but it relied on good old-fashioned reaction mass for actual thrust. The failure rate had dropped by 89%. At the Altarian display, their latest reality manipulation device came with a mechanical backup system, just in case the universe decided to stop cooperating. The manual clearly stated, "When in doubt, apply percussive maintenance." Even the vegans had adapted. Their consciousness integration technology now included what they called intuitive physical interfaces, buttons, switches, and levers that worked even when the telepathic components decided to take a coffee break. Marcus. The voice belonged to Dr. Keeblix, though the insectoid scientist looked remarkably different than he had the previous year. Gone were the purely decorative crystalline implants that had once adorned his carapace. In their place were practical tool attachments, microscopic manipulators, precision sensors, and what looked suspiciously like a tiny hammer. Professor Marcus nodded, noting the changes. "I see you've made some modifications." Keeblix's mandibles clicked with what Marcus had learned was embarrassed amusement. "The human integration protocol has proven surprisingly effective. My research efficiency has increased by 340% since I stopped relying entirely on quantum processing for routine tasks." "Sometimes the old ways work," Marcus agreed, taking a sip from his ever-present thermos. "Indeed. In fact, I was hoping to discuss a collaboration. My people have developed a new bioengineering technique, but we're having trouble with the implementation phase. Our quantum biological manipulators keep experiencing cascade failures when they encounter unexpected variables." Marcus grinned. "Let me guess, you need something that can adapt on the fly without having to recalculate reality?" "Precisely. We were thinking perhaps a mechanical approach." "I might have some ideas. What's the project?" Keeblix's compound eyes brightened. "Asteroid mining. We've located a field of rare mineral asteroids, but they're in an unstable gravitational environment. Our reality manipulation equipment can't maintain coherence in the chaotic conditions." Marcus felt a familiar stirring of excitement. A new challenge, a new chance to prove that sometimes simple was better. "Funny thing about gravitational chaos," he said. "It follows predictable patterns if you know what to look for. And mechanical systems don't care about reality fluctuations, they just work." "Excellent. Shall we discuss terms? The Galactic Mining Consortium has authorized me to offer a full partnership agreement. Marcus paused, his coffee halfway to his lips. A year ago, no alien species would have offered humanity a partnership in anything more complex than waste disposal. Now they were offering full collaboration on advanced industrial projects. I'll need to see the technical specifications, he said, but yeah, I think we can work something out. Fair warning, though, my approach tends to be pretty straightforward. That, Keeblick said with clicking mandibles that sounded suspiciously like laughter, is precisely what we're counting on. As they walked toward the partnership signing area, Marcus noticed a familiar figure approaching from the direction of the judge's platform. Ambassador Thrawn moved with the measured dignity of crystalline nobility, but there was something different about his prismatic form, additional facets that looked distinctly functional rather than decorative. Human Marcus, Thrawn's voice chimed with formal politeness. I trust you are finding this year's expo educational? It's been enlightening, Marcus replied. I see everyone's been busy this year. Thrawn's form pulsed with what Marcus had learned to recognize as diplomatic satisfaction. The integration of human engineering principles has proven remarkably successful across multiple technological applications. The Crystalline Confederation has experienced a 67% reduction in system failures since implementing mechanical redundancies. Glad to hear it. Though I notice you've still got all the fancy quantum processing. Of course. But now, when the quantum processing encounters an unsolvable paradox, it simply defaults to the mechanical backup system. Thrawn paused, his crystalline structure refracting light in patterns that suggested mild embarrassment. I must admit, there is something profoundly satisfying about solutions that simply work. Marcus raised his thermos in a small toast. Welcome to the club, Ambassador. Though I have to ask, what brings you to find me specifically? This feels like more than a social call. Thrawn's form shifted to more serious colors. Indeed, the Galactic Council has a proposition. We've detected another predecessor site, this one apparently still active. Our preliminary surveys suggest it may be some form of automated manufacturing facility, but our attempts to interface with it have been unsuccessful. Let me guess, Marcus said with a grin. Your advanced technologies bounced off it like tennis balls off a battleship. An inelegant but accurate assessment. The facility appears to respond only to direct physical interaction, and our quantum consciousness reality manipulation systems cannot establish the necessary interface protocols. Marcus set down his thermos and cracked his knuckles. Ambassador, are you asking me to go poke an ancient alien factory with a stick until it starts working? In the most respectful terms possible, yes. Marcus looked around the expo hall, taking in the sight of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations proudly displaying their quantum mechanical hybrid technologies, their reality manipulation systems with manual overrides, and their consciousness integration devices with good old-fashioned buttons. You know what? He said, picking up his thermos and finishing his coffee. That sounds like exactly the kind of problem I was built to solve. When do we leave? Thrawn's crystalline form pulsed with relief and anticipation. The expedition departs tomorrow morning, station time. We've prepared a full technical briefing on the facility's known characteristics. I'll be there, Marcus said. Though I should probably mention my approach to ancient alien technology tends to involve a lot of hitting things with wrenches until they work properly. Human Marcus, Thrawn replied with what sounded suspiciously like crystalline laughter. At this point, that's exactly what we're hoping for. As the two of them walked toward the expedition briefing area, Marcus reflected on how much things had changed in just 1 year. The galaxy had learned that sometimes the best solution wasn't the most sophisticated one, sometimes it was just the one that worked. And if that happened to involve punching ancient alien technology until it cooperated, well, that was just another Tuesday for humanity. The universe, it seemed, was finally ready for some proper engineering.